My next guest, as promised, is Maria Farmer, who says Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell sexually assaulted her. So she says she saw Trump at Epstein's office late at night in 1995. At the time, she was 25 years old. Epstein had just hired Farmer, who was an artist, to help him acquire art. Farmer urged the FBI to look at Trump's connections to Epstein twice, in 1996 and again in 2006, which, of course, means Trump's name could very well be in those government files that the administration is refusing to release. Maria Farmer is now suing the government to try to get the unredacted files about the allegations she brought forward about Epstein. Now, President Trump has not been the target of any investigation related to Epstein, nor has he been accused of any criminal wrongdoing in this case. Maria Farmer is out front now for her first television interview, sharing her story since filing her lawsuit, and she is joined by her attorney, Jennifer Freeman. So thanks very much to both of you. And Maria, I want to give everyone a chance to understand exactly what happened here. I mean, you said that Jeffrey Epstein calls you to come to his office and you go, and then you're sitting there waiting.
What's good, people? Dr. John Podcast is back again. New evidence from Jeffrey Epstein's digital records has emerged that directly contradicts years of White House statements on the matter. Legal experts say it's a verified seismic revelation that could reshape the entire saga, and it's not hyperbole. We are talking about an email, just one email among tens of thousands. But this single message has been identified, verified, and spotlighted by members of Congress, by seasoned legal analysts, by investigators who have dedicated years of their lives to understanding the full scope of Epstein's operations. And they are all saying the same thing. This is the smoking gun. This is the evidence that Donald Trump has been dreading since the very first Epstein documents started entering the public domain. And I know what you're thinking. We've heard Epstein conspiracy theories.
And Donald Trump walks in. What happened?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on, Aaron. I really appreciate it because I need to say up front that I've waited 3 decades to be able to even be heard about this because the government has not held any of the people I reported accountable. And so basically the night before I went in, before I began working for Epstein, he called me at very late in the evening and asked me to come up to the Helmsley Palace offices. And I didn't even have money for a subway token. It's kind of embarrassing. So I had to go running up there. And so I told Epstein, I'll be up there. It'll probably take me until like 9. He's like, okay. So I get there and I'm waiting. It's dark. Like there's no light on in the offices. And I thought that was really weird. So I'm seated against the wall in the main part of the offices and just waiting for Epstein. And he says, I'll be out in a minute, and he's got the door closed.
Before, we've seen countless accusations and wild claims circulating across social media platforms. We've witnessed the rabbit holes and the speculative threads that lead nowhere. But this is fundamentally different. This is not gossip from some anonymous source with an agenda. This is not a tabloid hit piece designed to generate controversy. This is Jeffrey Epstein himself, his own words, his own private communication, written in what he believed was a confidential setting, never expecting the world to see it. And in that message, he explicitly states that Donald Trump was fully aware of what was happening with those underage girls. Let that sink in for a moment. The most notorious figure in modern sex trafficking history, a man who operated a criminal enterprise that preyed on vulnerable young women for decades, wrote in black and white that the current president of the United States knew about the girls, not suspected, but now we have direct evidence from the source himself that paints a completely different.
And then a few minutes later, this man walks in a business suit, kind of tall, imposing. And I immediately was like, that's Donald Trump. What's he doing here? I'm supposed to be working for Epstein and interviewing with him. Why is Donald Trump here? And he walked up about, a few feet from me and just stood over me in a very imposing way and looked at me like he was in on some secret or something. It was really weird, like smirking kind of. And I felt threatened, so I made an ugly face. And when I made that ugly face, Epstein walked out from the offices on this side. Trump's standing here, I'm here. And he walks out of his office and he goes, oh, no, no, no. He was laughing at me. And he goes, she's not here for you. Follow me. Right? And he escorts him in to this other room. And I always wondered, who was she in there? Was someone in there? Right? And I have no way of knowing. Nothing. But
picture. And as if that wasn't explosive enough, there's another email that has surfaced in this document dump. An email where Epstein actually brags about knowing how dirty Donald is. Those are his exact words, not mine. He's essentially admitting that he possessed damaging information about the president, information that could be weaponized, information that gave him leverage. The implication is unmistakable. Epstein believed he had something on Trump, something that could be used if necessary, something that could protect him or influence decisions. And when you step back and look at the full picture, when you connect these dots, it raises profoundly unsettling questions about the nature of their relationship and what Trump might have been willing to do to keep certain secrets buried. This is not about political gamesmanship. This is not about partisan bickering. This is about the possibility that the leader of the free world was compromised by a convicted sex trafficker who had blackmail material on him. Now, before I go any further, let me be absolutely clear about something.
I felt very intimidated because I had on running shorts and I was vulnerable, sweaty, just a nobody in an office with these two men. That it felt very predatory and uncomfortable. I have to say that when I made that ugly face, he backed off. It wasn't like he was aggressive after that, but he made a really vulgar comment following. And I don't know if it was like, like locker room talk in the 90s, the way men were, but he made a joke to Epstein. Oh, I thought she was 16. And I thought that was so strange because at the time my sister she was 15 actually. And I didn't think it was funny, even though it was just a little bit inappropriate, but I thought, I don't know what it was, but anyway, and then they entered that room.
So Epstein says, she's not for you. And then when did Trump make the comment about your age? Again, you were 25 at the time, right? So, I mean, you were a 25-year-old woman. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
was
a
it
woman,
after Epstein
right.
said that comment that he made the comment about age, or?
This email does not prove that Trump committed a crime. I want to emphasize that point because accuracy matters. I'm not here to make claims that aren't supported by evidence. Nobody with any credibility is suggesting that this single piece of correspondence constitutes proof of criminal activity. Not yet, at least. But what it does is far more dangerous for Trump in a political sense. It blows a massive hole in his carefully crafted defense. It undermines his entire version of events. Because here's the thing, you cannot have Epstein writing in private communications that Trump was in the know about the girls while Trump stands in front of cameras and microphones telling the world he had no clue what was happening. Both of those statements cannot coexist.
Yes. So he first said, no, she's not here for you, which immediately made me feel weird. Like, was there someone there? Right? In that other room. And so that's another reason I was nervous. And so as soon as he said that, laughed, I made the face, all that stuff, they started to walk away into that other room where he's escorting him. He goes, come with me. And he takes Trump into this other room in the offices at 9:00 at night. And there's no one else that I know of in these offices, but was someone in that room. So I always wondered what that was about. And anyway, that comment was made under his breath as they were entering that room.
As they were in that room.
And I thought it was rude. I don't care what age I was. Like, it's rude to say.
Which, Jennifer, I guess, brings me to where you are now. I know you're helping Maria now sue to get the unredacted government files related to her story. What do you expect these will show?
One of them is false. And when the contradictory statement comes from the man who was actually running the trafficking operation, the man who had absolutely no motive to lie in what he thought was a private message, you have to ask yourself which version is more credible. This email surfaced as part of an enormous document release. We're talking about a cache of records that runs into the tens of thousands of pages. The House Oversight Committee made these materials public, and when journalists and researchers started combing through them systematically, they discovered that Trump's name appears with alarming frequency. More than half of the email exchanges reviewed by one major news outlet mentioned him in some way. Half. That statistic alone should make you pause. If Trump's relationship with Epstein was truly as casual and insignificant as he's claimed, why does his name show up everywhere? Why is he referenced so consistently across these private communications? The White House, predictably, has responded by dismissing everything as a political hit job orchestrated by Democrats. Trump himself has gone on the record calling it all a hoax. He's argued that if there was truly a smoking gun, his opponents would have deployed it years ago because they controlled the files for 4 years. He's insisting that the lack of an earlier release proves there's nothing substantial here. But that defense is paper thin. The files weren't all available years ago. Many of these records were only recently obtained and processed. And more importantly, the email sitting right now in the public domain says exactly what it says. You can attack the timing. You can question the motives of the people releasing it, but you can't erase the content. I want to walk you through the full scope of what's happening here because context is everything in stories like this. The document release in question happened when the House Oversight Committee, which had been investigating Epstein's web of connections for an extended period, finally made public a massive collection of records. We're talking about somewhere between 20,000 and 23,000 pages of material. Emails, financial statements, correspondence, internal documents from Epstein's estate. This wasn't some small leak or a few pages accidentally slipping through the cracks. This was a comprehensive disclosure that gave the American public more access to Epstein's private communications than we've ever had. And right from the start, researchers began noticing Trump's name appearing everywhere. Now, let's zero in on the specific emails that are causing this firestorm. The first one, the one being called the smoking gun, contains Epstein's direct statement that Trump knew about the girls. It's straightforward, it's unambiguous. There's no room for interpretation. Epstein is saying, in his own private words, that the individual who would eventually become president was fully aware that underage girls were being exploited. And remember, this isn't a political opponent manufacturing an accusation. This isn't someone with a grudge trying to destroy Trump's reputation. This is Jeffrey Epstein himself, writing in what he assumed was a secure, confidential setting. He had zero incentive to embellish. He had no political axe to grind. He was simply communicating what he believed to be true to someone he trusted. And what he believed to be true was that Trump was in the know. The second email that has generated enormous attention is the one where Epstein talks about knowing how dirty Donald is. That's different. That's not just about what Trump knew. That's about what Epstein thought he could do with that knowledge. When someone makes a statement like that, they're signaling that they possess leverage. They're indicating that they have information that could cause significant damage. And they're making sure the person they're communicating with understands that dynamic. The chilling implication is that Epstein may have been holding this over Trump's head. He may have been using his knowledge as a form of protection or influence. And if that's accurate, if the president was in a position where a convicted trafficker had blackmail material on him, we're not just talking about a political scandal. This becomes a national security issue. We're talking about the possibility that the person with the nuclear codes was compromised by someone involved in one of the most depraved criminal operations in modern history. The political fallout has been swift and predictable. Democrats have seized on these revelations with understandable enthusiasm. Key figures in Congress have gone on camera to express their concerns about what these documents reveal. They've questioned why the White House has been fighting so aggressively over redactions and release schedules. They've pointed out that if Trump truly has nothing to hide, he should be demanding full transparency rather than trying to control the narrative. It's a legitimate question. Why would an innocent person fight so hard to keep documents sealed? Why would someone with nothing to fear want to limit public access to information? The White House hasn't offered a persuasive answer to that question. They've defaulted to attacking the messenger rather than engaging with the substance of what's been revealed. On the Republican side, the response has been disheartening but predictable. Rather than addressing the actual content of the emails, Trump's allies have focused almost entirely on discrediting the people who brought them to light. They're suggesting that Democrats selectively leaked certain messages to construct a false narrative. They're calling the whole thing a political hit job. They're implying that the timing of the release is suspicious. And look, I'll be the first to admit that Democrats are absolutely being strategic about which documents they highlight. That's how politics works. Every party plays those games. But here's what they can't change. The emails are authentic. The words belong to Epstein. Nobody is seriously disputing the validity of these documents. You can complain about the timing until you're blue in the face, but that doesn't alter what Epstein wrote. You can scream hoax from the rooftops, but Epstein still put in writing that Trump knew about the girls. Attacking the people who released the information doesn't make the information disappear. This is the part that truly bothers me. For years, conservative politicians and media figures have positioned themselves as the defenders of children. They've built entire platforms around fighting trafficking and protecting vulnerable young people from predators. They've used this issue to mobilize their base and attack their opponents. It's been a central pillar of their messaging strategy for a long time. But now, when documentary evidence emerges linking their candidate to the most infamous child predator in modern history, suddenly everything changes. Suddenly, the documents don't matter. Suddenly, we need to talk about something else. Suddenly, it's all about process and timing and political motives. You can't have it both ways. You cannot spend years telling your supporters that you're the party that protects children and then ignore damning evidence from Epstein's own emails. The hypocrisy is staggering, and the fact that they're even attempting to maintain this contradiction tells you everything about the moral bankruptcy at play. Let's look at the polling data for a moment because the numbers tell an interesting story. Trump's overall approval rating has remained fairly stable throughout his second term. It hovers in the low to mid-40s, which is roughly where it was during his first term. He's never been a broadly popular figure. He's always relied on intense support from a dedicated base while struggling to win over the wider electorate. The Epstein revelations haven't caused an overnight collapse in his numbers, but they are doing damage around the margins. His favorability among independent women has been trending downward. His standing with suburban voters, the same demographic that shifted away from him in previous elections, continues to soften. Every time a new Epstein story breaks, the numbers dip a little further. Because even people who support Trump's policies, even those who approve of his handling of the economy or immigration, they don't want to be associated with this. They don't want to defend their president against allegations involving child sex trafficking. That's a line that too many people simply cannot cross. The drip, drip, drip of these document releases is making it harder and harder for those voters to look the other way. Each new email, each new revelation builds on what came before. The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. And Trump's own handling of the situation only makes things worse. His defense, his actual public defense, is that if Democrats had a smoking gun, they would have used it already. Think about how weak that argument is. He's not saying the emails are forged. He's not saying Epstein was lying. He's not offering an alternative explanation for why a private message would contain such damaging content. His entire defense is essentially, well, if this was really a problem, someone would have come after me with it by now. That is not the response of an innocent man. That is the response of someone who is hoping the clock runs out before the full picture comes into focus. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this story is far from over. In fact, it's almost certainly going to escalate. There are still thousands of pages of Epstein-related documents that haven't been fully examined. Journalists, congressional staffers, and independent researchers are continuing to work through this massive archive. Every week brings new discoveries, another email, another financial record, another piece of correspondence that adds context and depth to the emerging picture. And the picture is getting uglier with each passing day. The White House can call everything a hoax. They can attack the media relentlessly. They can insist that Democrats are playing politics with serious allegations. But they cannot stop people from reading these documents. They cannot unrelease tens of thousands of pages of evidence. The information is out there now, and it's not going back in the box. I believe the Democratic strategy going forward will be to maintain a slow and steady approach. They're not going to drop everything at once and hope for a single massive news cycle. Instead, they'll keep releasing findings piece by piece. They'll keep having members of Congress go on camera to discuss what's in the files. They'll keep connecting the dots publicly and allowing the media to amplify their message. And the reason this approach is so effective is that Trump can't effectively counter it. He can't refute specific emails. He can't provide contradictory evidence. All he can do is repeat the word hoax over and over and trust that his base will remain loyal. And they will. That's not really in question. His supporters will stick with him regardless of what comes out. The real question is about everyone else. Will independents, moderates, and swing voters look at an email from Jeffrey Epstein stating that Trump knew about the girls and simply shrug? I don't think so. For a lot of people, this is going to be the thing that sticks, not because of any single piece of evidence, but because of the overall pattern, the relationship that was supposedly casual, but appears in more than half of the email exchanges. The claim that Trump cut Epstein off, but Epstein was writing privately about having leverage over him. The insistence that Trump knew nothing, while the man who ran the whole operation was saying the opposite. At a certain point, the weight of all of this becomes too much to explain away. You can only dismiss so many inconvenient facts before the narrative collapses. There's a legal dimension to this story as well. Right now, there's no active criminal investigation into Trump related to Epstein, at least not one that's been publicly acknowledged. But there are ongoing legal battles about unsealing additional documents, including grand jury records. The Justice Department has filed requests to unseal certain Epstein grand jury materials, and that process is still unfolding. If more information comes out, especially material that goes beyond emails and into areas like witness testimony or financial transactions, this story could shift from politically damaging to legally dangerous very quickly. Trump knows this. The White House knows this. That's exactly why they've been fighting so aggressively over redactions. That's why they've been trying to control the narrative around what gets released and when. They're not doing this because they're confident there's nothing to find. They're doing it because they're terrified of what might still be out there. Stepping back from the immediate political implications, this story represents something deeper. It's a moral test for the country. We are watching a sitting president get connected through documentary evidence to one of the worst sex trafficking operations in modern history. The question every American needs to ask themselves is whether this matters to them personally, not politically, not in terms of election strategy, but as human beings. Because if we've reached a point where a significant portion of the population is willing to overlook something like this because they agree with the president's policies, then we have a much bigger problem than Donald Trump. We have a problem with our collective values. We have a problem with what we're willing to accept from the people we put in power. I know what some of you are thinking. What about Bill Clinton? What about all the other powerful people who were in Epstein's orbit? That's a fair question. Every single person who had connections to Epstein's operation should face scrutiny. Party affiliation shouldn't matter. But right now, only one of those people is the President of the United States. Only one of them has the power of the federal government behind them. Only one of them controls the Justice Department that decides what gets investigated and what gets buried. And that's why this story matters more than anything else in politics right now. Because if the president is compromised, if he has something in his past that a sex trafficker could have used as leverage, then everything becomes suspect. Every decision, every appointment, every policy, it all gets filtered through the question of whether he's acting in the country's interest or trying to protect himself. And that brings me back to the question I keep asking every time we talk about Trump and Epstein. If Donald Trump truly has nothing to hide, if his conscience is completely clear, why doesn't he just release everything? All of it. Every document, every email, every record. If there's genuinely nothing there, full transparency would be the most powerful move he could make. It would silence every critic. It would destroy every conspiracy theory. It would prove once and for all that he was telling the truth. But he won't do it. He keeps fighting over redactions. He keeps trying to control the flow of information. He keeps calling it a hoax instead of opening the books. And I'm sorry, but that tells you something. It tells you everything. Innocent people don't act like that. Innocent people don't spend this much energy trying to keep documents sealed. Innocent people say, go ahead, look at everything. I've got nothing to worry about. The fact that Trump refuses to take that approach with the Epstein files tells you exactly where this story is heading. It's heading somewhere dark, somewhere that powerful people don't want it to go. And the only question left is whether the rest of us have the courage to follow it there, or whether we'll do what we always do and look away because the truth is just too ugly to confront.